Hello, here's some intro to the many videos for this class. A lot of them are short, so please don't be overwhelmed by the 6 videos. Um, we're looking at competitions in Florence in the beginning of the Middle Renaissance and how they fuel essentially this new style, this more naturalistic style, more looking like things produced in the classical period. Um, the first of those competitions happens in one of 3 places in the city of Florence. So I'm showing you a map of Florence. I think I mentioned this earlier when we talked about Siena, but most Renaissance cities are set up around 2 squares, one that belongs to the church and one that belongs to essentially the government. And so we're going to look at the one that is attached to the baptistry, essentially the building that you'll learn about in the next video. And then we're going to go to the one that is in the building in between the church and the state building, and that is essentially a warehouse for grain in case, you know, your city gets sieged. So anyway, that's Florence, church, city, church, state, and granary, or San Michele. And here's a nice image of essentially the towers that mark those 3 spaces. The church is the most dominant, but there is the tower of the state building, the Palazzo Vecchio, and then I believe this tower is the one from the granary or San Michele. Now we're not going to deal with the third of the competitions. Again, there are 3 competitions, and the first has to do with the cathedral itself, the city church, having to do with that dome. Believe it or not, the Florentines built that church beginning in the late 1200s, but by 1400 they still hadn't finished the dome. In any event, it's an interesting story. Brunelleschi and Ghiberti, the 2 artists of the day, kind of compete to do it. They actually get the commission together from this body here, the Opera, which is essentially a committee. But Brunelleschi somehow marginalizes Lorenzo Ghiberti and does the thing himself. A very ingenious construction using essentially an octagonal ring at the base and then these kind of ribs. In any event, we're not going to deal with that in this class. Instead, in the next video, you're going to learn about the baptistry doors. Now, the baptistry, again, is this building in which baptisms happened, essentially a recording of all citizens, since most citizens of Florence were expected to be Christian. Although that was not necessarily true, but in any event, a recording of citizens in the baptistry, a separate building in front of that church. And again, they wanted, in 1400, there was a sense of great civic pride. They wanted to decorate. The commission for the church said, okay, well, let's get some nice bronze doors. And that's what you're learning about. One of the sets of doors, actually the second set, the first one is really old. And the second one is in the textbook the third one is in the textbook if you want to read about it. But the second the competition for the second set of doors again pits Brunelleschi against Lorenzo Ghiberti, and this is the competition that is spoken about in the next video. The end result is that Ghiberti wins that competition and creates this set of doors. The video was wrong. It actually says it's wrong. This is the set of doors that Ghiberti creates. You can see that they are like the panel that he produced for the competition. And I just wanted to give you a little chart of the subjects. You know, this chart corresponds to the subjects here. This is not the first time you've seen that works of art are sort of comprehensive in their imagery. In this time, it's giving us the life of Christ with the people who write about the life of Christ. These 8 guys on the bottom. In any event, this is actually a panel from that door. I did want to say that that video in V3.2 on the competition says that Ghiberti made buttons and other baubles. We're going to find out later that there are these things called unions, labor unions, and that's based on the value of the materials. You know, we learned about that in the last module, and to be honest, um, Ghiberti's union was a pretty strong one. He was not just a jewelry maker. He could work in precious metals, in bronze and gold, gilding, you know, gold leaf on top of that bronze. Anyway, this is a scene called the flagellation, where Christ is tortured before his death. One of the first really lovely, not the first, but one of the first nude figures, semi-nude figures in the history of art. Now, this competition, the Orsan Micheli, the granary statues, is what I want to tell you just a little bit more about, and that's in the video 3.3. Here's the building. You know, it's just a square building, and again, you'll read about that, I believe, in the video. And I wanted to show you that, again, it has niches for these statues on the bottom floor. And again, you learn that each of these is built for created for a guild or a trade union, city unions. And here's a chart that sort of outlines like which trade unions are hiring sculptors to do statues for them. And the yellow ones are the ones I'm going to look at, the statues I'm going to look at today. But I did want you to note the unions, and so just a short, you know, some of them were really quite wealthy. The wool merchants, for example, a cloth industry. Here, the silk manufacturers work together with the goldsmiths because they use the same chemicals to produce silk as they do, you know, to make that gold really quite fine. And so these two organizations, these trade unions, are really quite wealthy. The doctors tended to work together with the painters because, you know, painters have to mix things, paints, from pigments, and put it together with gloppy stuff to create like kind of liquidy, painty things. And that's what doctors and pharmacists do. So again, just to give you some sense of who at least the more wealthy trade unions are in town, and then, you know, who they're hiring, the artists here, and then what statue they're hiring. I'm sorry, not hiring, what statues they're asking of the artists. For example, Lorenzo de Ghiberti is asked to do a statue of John the Baptist, and by the wool merchants. Now, there's something about the patron saint here. St. John the Baptist, as you probably know, maybe you don't, but wore a wool shirt to go into the desert. It was part of his life story. In any event, so the wool merchants choose him as their patron saint. The bankers here choose St. Matthew as their patron saint. Again, if you look through the life of St. Matthew, he was a tax collector, so he dealt with money. And again, something about the life of this particular saint made these trade unions associate with them. I don't think this got said in the video, but the linen weavers choose St. Mark. St. Mark, part of his life was spent in Egypt. Egypt is where, you know, cotton is grown, and so again, the linen weavers asked for a statue of St. Mark. I think this is part of what is revealed in the video, that in this case it's Donatello who does this statue of St. Mark for the linen weavers, who sort of does the more innovative job than Lorenzo de Ghiberti in this case, and you know, pointing to the way in which the drapery falls so incredibly naturalistically. Here, Ghiberti does a very fine job. It's a lovely line for that drapery, but a little too swayy, a little too unnaturalistic, a little too medieval. Same with the contrapposto. I think that was dealt with in the video as well. Donatello nails it. You can stop the video now if you wish, but I really just wanted to show you two more statues. Donatello, again, really won this competition of the Orsan Micheli statues. He does a St. George for the sword and makers and the armorers. Again, St. George's story has something to do, you know, he slayed a dragon with his sword. It's a really interesting statue. Donatello always does something very interesting, a little different. I mean, we don't see any contrapposto here. It is naturalistic, but highly expressive. But the one I love most, and again, this is just Donatello's oddness, the one I love most is this. It's St. Louis, who's here representing not a trade union, but one of the two political parties, the Guelph Party, who had some association with the King of France. So, in any event, St. Louis is a French saint, a very young saint, who didn't want, wanted to live a life of poverty. He was an aristocrat, but was asked to put on the garbs of the church hierarchy here. He is a bishop saint. He's got that big bishop hat and whatever. The statue is essentially hollow. Uh, it really is hollow. It's just this, if you were to turn it around, there'd be nothing but this like sheet of metal that crunches around the drapery. The head is hollow. There's no skull behind that face mask, and then the hat is just like plunked on top. It's it, Donatello always came up with. And this hand, actually, this glove here is not attached to an arm. That you can definitely probably even see. It's like a Photoshop fail of the Middle Renaissance. But anyway, I just wanted to show you a little bit about the quirkiness of Donatello, the expressiveness of Donatello. So he doesn't he moves between middle and high Renaissance in terms of age. He lives a long time, and so he's a little hard to characterize. But for the test, I'll just ask you about that one St. Mark that was in the video.